going to invite Burke to come up to the podium to introduce our speakers and to begin our program.
Greetings and welcome. Last week we had a serious discussion about national security with Arnold Panaro about strategy and policy. There was certainly some humor and some human stories mixed in, but it was mostly serious. This day we are turning to people. And I have to say, y'all are going to really enjoy getting to hear from our three guest speakers. I wish I didn't have to spend time introducing, because I know you want to hear from them and not from me, but I am going to say a few words in introduction. The motto of Rotary, most of us here know, is service above self, and our speakers today are three young people from Atlanta who chose to live that motto professionally by serving all of us in uniform. They didn't have to do this, because the nation's military has been an all-volunteer force for 50 years now. And our speakers, all three of them in particular, were blessed with wonderful families, a great education, healthy minds and bodies, exemplary character, and outstanding leadership abilities, which gave them countless options to choose any number of easier, safer, and more lucrative paths. But these three instead made the selfless decision to serve in this challenging and dangerous mission, where the reward is not financial, but rather the inner spiritual reward of serving the greater good, serving the common good of all Americans. And for these three as officers, the additional inner reward of inspiring and leading the others in uniform who do the same. They each swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And for 250 years now, these three and the millions who've served before them have secured our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and protected us from ever-present evil, bad people, forces of tyranny, who would eagerly destroy our Constitution, our happiness, our liberty, and even our lives. As a nation, we recognize this service each year on Veterans Day, today and tomorrow. In my own dual and parallel professional roles of leading companies and leading Marines, one of my great joys over the years has been to introduce to civilian leaders, like all of you in this room, those who lead our uniform members, the three speakers, so that you leaders can see firsthand the extraordinary quality of the force that protects us. So let me introduce you briefly in 1 minute or less each to our three speakers. And I'll go in order from oldest to youngest. Frank Wilson, the fourth. And Frank, why don't you come on up here and have a seat as I introduce you. I'll ask each of you to come up as I start introducing you and just have a seat up here. Frank Wilson, Lovett class of 2000. All of our speakers graduated from Lovett. Frank graduated from the Air Force Academy, where he played football and boxed, and then cross-commissioned into the Marine Corps. He served as a Marine infantry officer just 6 weeks after graduating from the year-long officer schools in Quantico. Frank was in combat in Iraq leading Marines. He ended up, over his 5 years of active duty, conducting and leading 3 extended combat deployments and a third deployment training peacekeepers in Sudan. Some of his service included literally the most ferocious fighting in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Among his decorations, a Bronze Star Medal with V for exceptional valor, a Commendation Medal with V for exceptional valor, and combat action ribbons for multiple engagements in direct combat. On one occasion, he organized and led a quick reaction force that raced to rescue another American force which had been surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, and he literally saved the lives of dozens of Americans. After active duty, Frank earned an MBA from Georgia Tech, and he's now a middle market manager with Regions Bank, lives here in Atlanta with his wife and children. Chris Weaver, Lovett class of 17. I met Chris when I got to serve as the commencement speaker at his graduation. What really struck me was his classmates kept telling me in our preparation for this repeatedly how they were so inspired by his commitment to service on all kinds of fronts. And I wish I had time to tell you more of those. This is before entering the Army. In fact, at his graduation, when he got his diploma, his classmates all screamed, "Thank you for your service." Now, they did that partly in, subtle humor because that's such a commonly used phrase, but also because they really admired him. They didn't do that for anybody else in his class. He graduated from the U.S. military at West Point, serves as an Army infantry officer, and is a graduate of the Army's challenging Ranger School. He's also a senior jump master for airborne operations, currently assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. Chris's unit served on a rapid response force that deployed in support of diplomatic evacuation operations in Africa, and then he was called by the mission commander in Iraq to serve there with other government agencies focusing on locating and eliminating the remaining outposts of terror cells. And he was awarded a Bronze Star Medal for his service there. And finally, Waswa Robbins. Waswa graduated Lovett, class of 2021. He just graduated this past May from the U.S. Naval Academy, where fellow Rotarian Harold Melton and his wife and I were in attendance. But let me go back further with Waswa. You heard a little bit from Kathy about his background, but it's incredibly inspiring. There is a video that I'll be happy to share with folks. Kathy has seen it, and you will shed tears when you see his life story and Roxanne's life story. With his biological parents deceased and his twin brother before he even knew them, Roxanne met him, adopted him, brought him back here to Atlanta, and put him through the Lovett School. Waswa is a lifelong soccer player and true soccer star, undoubtedly the best soccer player Lovett's ever had. He received the 2020 Atlanta Sportsman of the Year Award sponsored by the Southern Company, and went on to play soccer at Navy as well. But he also always remembers where he came from. He regularly travels back to his village in Uganda to coach, teach, and mentor the children there. You'll see that in the video. This is an amazing young man. Selected for service as a surface warfare officer, Waswa is now a student at Surface Warfare Officer School in San Diego, preparing to serve on the USS William P. Lawrence, a guided missile destroyer serving in the Indo-Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so pleased to present to you Captain Frank Wilson, U.S. Marine Corps, Captain Chris Weaver, U.S. Army, and Ensign Waswa Robbins, U.S. Navy. The first question I want to ask all three of you to answer that I know is on the minds of those in here, because several of you have told me that it's on your minds, is why? Why do you serve? What inspired you? Who inspired you to make this decision? What were your influencers? How did you come to end up doing this? Frank, let me start with you as the oldest here.
Sure, thank you, Mark. And also appreciate the introduction earlier. I think it was a young officer's introduction, which is a bit of a stretch in my place, but I'll take it wherever I can get it. It's interesting. Burke, you talked about originally how this has become an all-volunteer force. I know we were talking about way up here. So many of us didn't have an example of maybe direct family members who had been active duty, et cetera. And so a lot of my inspiration, while I did have grandfathers and an uncle that served, really just came from kind of the service mindset in general. I'd say that was exemplified by my parents and really by extended families on both sides of the family, whether it be in their church, nonprofits, for their school, different organizations that they supported, was really looking for what can be my avenue, what can be a way that I can give back. And while I knew very little about the services in general, had the opportunity to play football at Air Force, pursued that path, and just felt like that was an outlet. It was the right fit for me. And just a short version is, while Air Force was a great education, 9/11 happened when I was a sophomore. I really had a desire to lead small units in the war on terror, and felt like the Marine Corps had a lot more opportunities to do so. So I went to Officer Candidate School a second time and ended up finding that as my service outlet.
We're sure grateful you did. Chris, what about you?
So actually, mine's a little bit similar to Frank there. So there is a bit of a gap between Frank and I from both Lovett grads, but the Lovett School and many of the schools here in Atlanta, but especially Lovett from my own experience, does a phenomenal job of instilling that kind of service-oriented mindset, as well as seeing, like Frank said as well, with my parents instilling that through whether it's our church services or things of that nature, that those values ingrained in your community. But the one thing Lovett does a really, really good job at is connecting those previous graduates that went on to service academies. So while Frank, I didn't know personally, one of the guys that I knew personally a few years older than me was a guy named Cyrus Wilson, who was a Marine Corps aviation officer. Cyrus would always talk about Frank being one of the inspirations for him for why he decided to then go to the Naval Academy and become a Marine. Cyrus was the older brother of my good friend Cameron Wilson, so growing up, I wanted to emulate Cyrus as well, and just that continuation of that mentality being performed at that when that opportunity came. And honestly, the way I decided on West Point was one night it was my freshman year of high school. I was doing homework one night and just found myself on the West Point admissions page, read through the candidate they were looking for, but more importantly, read through the kind of person they created as a graduate. And having that Cyrus Wilson mindset of wanting to be that one day, I'm like, well, if they're going to make me that at the end of the day, there's no challenge too great that I wouldn't be open to pursuing. Same as that hard work mindset that's ingrained from the athletic department at Lovett and stuff like that. It was an interesting challenge and a very, very clear goal at the end of where I wanted to be able to go one day.
Great, Chris. Inspiring. And Wasp, I still remember in your junior year when the head of Lovett School called me and said, we've got this wonderful young man who wants to go to the Naval Academy. We don't know anything about that. Can you sort of talk with him? So it's been a great journey, and you just graduated. What led you to this?
Yes, sir. That's a very good question. I think a couple of things why I served is particularly my grandmother, who raised me in Uganda. She instilled in me service and to live a life of service from a very young age. She, gave up everything just to take care of me. So she's primarily the reason why I serve. Also, my mother, who came to Uganda from the United States with a nonprofit, and just the way that she loves the people of Uganda and ministers to them and serves every way that she can is also another reason. And particularly why I chose Navy. I was recruited for soccer. That was obviously really good. But from a very young age, I was very interested in the military. Growing up in Uganda, I saw the harm that it could do, but also coming over to the United States, becoming a citizen, seeing the good that it brings out in society, that it can do to protect its citizens, and just all the good things that it stands for. I wanted to be a part of that team, and thankfully, I was admitted to the Naval Academy, and started my journey there, sir.
Great, y'all. Thank you. You all may have more questions about some of this, about why they serve. I'm going to move to another topic here of experience. You all, even you, Wasp, being just sort of right out of the Naval Academy, you've all got experiences that may be the most rewarding thing you've ever done, maybe the hardest thing you've ever done, maybe the funniest thing that you've done. Would love to have y'all share some of those. And Chris, why don't I start with you this time?
Sure. So mine is it actually hits all three of those. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but looking back, it's one of the funniest things that I've ever done, and it actually taught me a lot about myself. So full disclosure, I am a little biased right now because my current job, I oversee the training program of anybody at Fort Bragg in North Carolina that wants to try to go and complete Ranger School. They have to go through our month-long process. So even though it was about 4 years ago what I went through, it's on the top of my head every single day because that's all my job is, basically since I got back in June. But the final swamp movement of the swamp phase of Ranger School, it's called the Weaver Swamp, ironically, my last name also being Weaver. The night before you do that, they walk you through the whole night. You don't really know how long you're walking because it's the whole point. They just put those artificial stressors. They take away your food. They take away your sleep. They put weight on your back. They put you in uncomfortable situations as a leadership test because on that day, if your worst day of ground combat comes, you're not going to necessarily know what you're going into it until you're there. The only way to prepare for it is by putting yourself through the hardest possible training. Think of your Dick Winters jumping in, Band of Brothers. Not a single person on that aircraft had ever done that before. They didn't know what they were going to hit when they hit that drop zone. The only way to prepare for that, should that next big war come, is by going through training like this. But ironically, back to the Weaver Swamp, it's the final movement of the final day of the final phase of school. I've already been there for about 2 months. I'm probably about 20 hours away from a shower and about 96 hours away from being done with the school completely and never having to do it again. But every single step I took on that, I just kept getting stuck in the thickest mud. It was in early December, so the water was cold. There wasn't much water because it was in the winter, so it was a lot of quicksand mud. kept getting stuck. I was in the very back of the formation because of the position I was serving in at that time. The instructor who was overseeing it thought it was the funniest thing in the world that Ranger Weaver couldn't complete the Ranger Swamp. And that whole time I'm thinking, I just want to quit. This is the absolute worst thing I've ever been through in my entire life. Mind you, I'm 96 hours away from being done completely. And where we were located in the swamp, there was no way to basically quit. If you went back, you had to go back to the boat we just got out of and then paddle on your own the couple miles back to where we started, or you had to keep walking to the end of the swamp, and then at that point you already got through the swamp, so there's really no point in quitting. It was very forested, so they couldn't even medevac you from a helicopter if they so chose. But honestly, that moment in and of itself kind of taught me a lot about that, because when you're in those trying situations, the whole point of the school wasn't to make you walk through a swamp. It was to teach you how to perform when you're in those environments. You want to think of that reason why you started the movement and think about how good you're going to feel at the end of the movement, because when you're in the middle of it, whether it's a literal swamp movement, deployed in Iraq and Syria, or just whatever you might be seeing in your normal everyday life, if you know that you have the ability to make it through it, even though you might be suffering in that moment, it does eventually end. Every storm literally runs out of rain. The swamp is only so many 100 meters long. You get out. So looking back on it, it's a hilarious story, because it's pretty funny in the moment that I've never been more uncomfortable, more sad in my entire life, wanting to quit, even already knowing I was already going to graduate. I already had my go. I just literally had to finish the movement, but it taught me more in that moment than probably anything else that I've done to date.
That's great. Waswa, is there a Waswa swamp somewhere? Any experience you want to share with us?
Yes. So I've had, the Naval Academy, and I think all the service academies do a really good job of putting you in tough situations and having to work as a team to get out of them. So during my summers at the Naval Academy, we were exposed to the Navy and the Marine Corps, and during a particular Marine Corps training, I was, put in a pretty tough situation. Leatherneck was the name of the course. But even now here, I'm undergoing basic training in San Diego, and each day we're going into class and hours of doing a simulator, and you're pretty tired. You just want to go home, but the instructors tell us that putting in the extra reps and sets and the extra time now, being able to properly ship handle and drive a ship, so that I don't know if y'all know, in 2017, the USS Fitzgerald collided with a merchant vessel, and it killed a few sailors, probably around my age. And the instructors harp on us that, hey, we do not want this to ever happen again, so we need you to be at your best training, putting in the time now, so that we can safely drive these huge ships. And also we do firefighting training, wet training, and this is where we're focusing on preventing water from entering ships. And so it's a lot of training, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. So yeah.
It's great, Watson. You'd all be reassured the Navy has ramped up the quality of the training of its surface warfare officers. My father was a surface warfare officer, and he went to 10 weeks of OCS in Newport and then was aboard a ship, up driving the ship. Things have changed a lot since then. We can be reassured that we're producing more capable, qualified officers right on day one. Frank, what about you? Experiences rewarding, fun, funny, or most dangerous?
Sure. First, I'm going to apologize that any Marine who's worn dress blues knows what Batman goes through every day, because I actually cannot turn my head. I have to turn my whole body. So I appreciate everybody's patience with me.
Dress blue uniform looks great, very uncomfortable.
So I'm trying to spin to be able to see the room, but it's requiring a little bit more torso rotation. No, really hardest and funniest experience. So my second tour, I was a company executive officer. I was a brand new first lieutenant. That's like being a COO of a large private company. We were responsible for a city near the Syrian border, and we had a lot of responsibilities. The unit before us had been decimated. We had to try to retake territory. We had to train the Iraqi military and special forces to try to hold areas. There were lots of IEDs that we were dealing with on a daily basis. We had ambushes and attacks. We were trying to rebuild the infrastructure and try to build rapport with the folks. as a company XO, really it was as kind of like a COO. There's just a lot of responsibility, logistics, and running the company, but then also ran our night raids at night. So it was a difficult experience. I learned my limits. I learned that sleep is not a luxury, and I did see absolute burnout and had to go back to base. I think I slept for 36 straight hours, but certainly taught you to test your limits. It's a very difficult tour. We lost several Marines. One of my fellow lieutenants, Mark, died in my arms, and so it started off just a very tragic, very difficult, how are we going to achieve this? But bit by bit, block by block, concentric circles, we were able to build rapport with the community. We were able to take over territory. We were able to stop their ingress points. They were coming into the city. And so it was a success story that really stopped a flow of troops and supplies coming from Syria. It's also where the funniest story came from, I'll say briefly, is that General Mattis, there was a big personality. There was a New York Times reporter who tend to be fairly aggressive in their writing that was shadowing him, and I was escorting General Mattis for the day. And so we took this reporter through some of the most difficult parts of town, areas that he was not very comfortable in. We get up to the 5th-story building of the government center there, and General Mattis has a very big personality, as used to work for him. And he tells me, he said, you've misquoted me the last couple of times. He goes, and if you do it again, Lieutenant Wilson here is going to throw you off this building. And he looks him dead and the reporter looks him dead in the face. And I'm a God-fearing man. I'm actually a law-abiding man. Like, I knew I wouldn't do it. Joe Mattis knew I wouldn't do it. The reporter did not know I would not do it. And so hopefully that it ended up being a fairly neutral and fair article that came out the next week. So.
I'm sure it was. All right, that's great, y'all. Let me move to, and y'all have touched on this a little bit, human virtue. A topic some of you might not expect me to ask military folks about, but the military service has really emphasized the development and formation of human virtue because of what they're being asked to do for a living. It's such a challenging and dangerous environment, and as officers, they are responsible for everything, including the lives of the young people serving with them. We sometimes in the military summarize these virtues into 3 words: honor, courage, and commitment. Can you all give me some examples of when you have felt exercised in honor, courage, or commitment, or when you've seen someone exercising and said, that's how it's done? Wassel, why don't we start with you this time?
Yes, sir. I'm going to touch on commitment there. I think that's one of my favorite words and virtues. So at the Naval Academy, the mission is to imbue midshipmen with these 3 qualities: virtues, honor, courage, and commitment, and to also prepare them for a career in naval service, but also to return quality citizens. And so during my time at the academy, I'm not gonna lie, the academic rigor was very challenging for me. I went to Lovett, just like these 2 gentlemen here, and I thought Lovett prepared me well, but the academy was a different beast. So the academic rigor was very challenging, and I had to, spend some of the weekends putting in the extra time just to catch up or get ahead on assignments. And I think it showed my commitment there in the classroom, on the sports field. I went through a bunch of injuries on the soccer field, and I had to stay at the task in hand and lean on upperclassmen. And my senior year, I was able to have a squad of 10 midshipmen underneath me that I was in charge of, and managing their day-to-day life. And I saw just countless time of my second class, he's a senior now, but junior at the time. He was prior enlisted in the Navy, got accepted into the Naval Academy, and he's an awesome human being. I absolutely just love this guy. He just super honorable guy. Everything that he did, he lived with just a sense of purpose. He did everything right, and just me and him gelled really well. So yeah, I think it's the academy just taught me so much about just being a good all-around person, and yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's a great example also. The academies, deliberately part of it is not just education and training the academies, but it is very much in all 3 of the academies these gentlemen went to. There's a deliberate element of stressing you to your limit, so that when you go out into the world, it's not the first time you're facing that sort of thing. Frank, what about you?
I'd say probably the best example I had was my 3rd tour in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. It was summer of 2008. there were thousands of Taliban that were holding land. They had paid the farmers for the opium, for the poppy, but had not collected it yet. So they were absolutely determined not to give up this territory. And we came in areas that the British had not gone south of in 3 years. So it was ferocious fighting. I had a great hand-picked unit that I was able to take from my previous battalion over to a battalion landing team. It was an expeditionary force. But I think really it was, besides the combat arms, and it was really everything the Marine Corps teaches of you had to bring everything to bear, everything from the combat and the combined arms, calling in airstrikes, using different units, using armor, all of that to try to be able to progress territory. But more than anything, it was, unfortunately, we had I was a brand new captain with a fairly weak major that was running this weapons company reinforced, and I had to lean on these very senior lieutenants and myself to kind of get through, especially some very harrowing nights. We had one where he tried to creep, about 10 miles south, and ended up making less progress than we wanted to, and found ourselves surrounded. And it was really on us. It was 5 officers and about 300 Marines total, surrounded by about 2,000 Taliban. But the brotherhood and the commonality that built, the people who are still my lifelong friends, 2 of them were in my wedding, have followed their careers closely, and it just taught me a great deal about what it means to come together, and essentially it gives me great perspective in the business world today about keeping perspective when we think times are down, that this too shall pass.
Frank talks about this as it's just another day at the office with his calm demeanor. Let me tell you, that situation that he described, there are long studies of that whole battle. It was ferocious, and it took every human virtue for them to get through it and get out the other side. And Frank truly was heroic and on that day for that battle. And Chris, what about you? Examples of virtues for you and others?
Yes, sir. So, I'm very big on emulating the examples set by peers, superiors, and whatnot. My senior year at West Point was the year everything was shut down for COVID. So I graduated in 2021. We showed up in June of 2020 to New York, which already had a very restrictive COVID policy on top of the fact that we were following Department of Defense regulations as well. We showed up in of June of 2020. We did not leave the about 1.5 mile garrisoned West Point until December 13th. We weren't allowed outside the fence, so it was a very, very tough semester that ended up being almost a full tough year of very, very close confinement. With the 30 some odd cadets that were in your company that you were living alongside in those barrack style rooms. One of my classmates, her name was Haley Hodson. She was our top ranked cadet in my company. Always peered the top when everyone would evaluate each other based off leadership ability and trajectory of what we expected them to do in their service. She was always unanimously the number one person. That semester, she volunteered to be in a role of being basically the morale officer for our company. So every weekend, she would, out of her own pocket, make pancakes, make breakfast in the little day room, host movie nights, stuff like that, to really highlight the brotherhood and sisterhood that we had in that company. It really got a lot of people through a very, very, very tough time. Haley, unfortunately, passed away as a then lieutenant. She was in a training accident in Germany. But when I say that she was truly the best of us, every single one of us unanimously agreed that she was going to be the general officer of our class. She was going to be the number one person. And all of us, all the now 29 of us that graduated in my company, we spent all 4 years together, all 47 months at West Point, side by side, on the exact same floor of the exact same barracks room. Every single one of us knew Haley was the best of us, and we all tried to emulate that ability of, she was going through the same exact COVID issues we were going through, the same isolation from family, from loved ones, but you would have never have known that from her. The smile on her face every single day, she embodied every single thing that West Point wants its value in, that duty, honor, country, those interpersonal skills that are integral in leading any organization, nonetheless a military organization. And every single day since her passing, unfortunately, but really every single day since then, I've tried to emulate that in the way I approach it, whether it's the instructors that I'm overseeing now, whether it be the paratroopers that are in my platoon when I was a platoon leader, or the people that we interacted with in Iraq and Syria that had very little connection to what I had gone through previously as there. But it's that ability to just, even if you're on your worst day, you're still a leader. You're still expected to get those people across the finish line. You never let anybody know truly what's going through your mind until the job's done, and you can actually take that time to step back and kind of reevaluate where you're going.
Fantastic. Sorry to lose her, but it's amazing she still inspires to this day, and I share some similar stories with colleagues of mine. Let me get at least one more question in for you all before we move to the audience, and it's on leadership. you all are officers, and so in particular, your number one job beyond serving is to lead others in service. My personal opinion, and it's important I say this because it's sort of the background of my question, is that the military teaches and forms leadership better than any other organization that I've ever seen. I gave a speech a couple years ago at Harvard Business School, and the dean was sitting right down in front where Harold is sitting. And I said, this school purports to be one of the greatest developers of leaders in the world, but I know a couple of organizations that I think, even do it better down at Fort Bragg and at Quantico and at San Diego. And the crowd laughed. The dean stood up and he turned around and he said, General Whitman is right. So they recognize this. The business schools all recruit these kids heavily, Georgia Tech, this one, because they know that leadership development in those early years are so formational. So for the three of you, how has your service developed your leadership ability, or how have you seen it develop others? And or maybe another way of thinking it is, where have you seen it being done right, where you said, again, that's the way to do it? Frank, let me start with you on leadership.
Sure. And I'll just say that, from the beginning, I had exceptional, especially battalion leadership, that really led from the front and that were an incredible example. And so that really helped, craft from the time I was a new, first lieutenant. Retired Major General Renforth was with him with 2 tours. He helped plan the Battle of Fallujah for General Mattis. Actually, if no one knows, that he was a football coach, and the whole thing was designed like a kickoff, stay in your lane, to try to make sure that friendly fire was avoided. It was a simple structure, but it worked, and it ended up helping take the city. He really had this. He did have the ability to delegate, and he certainly did empower leaders around him. But he was just always willing to roll up his sleeves and lead from the front, and was not afraid to get his hands dirty. And just his example, and then other examples like Colonel Henderson in Afghanistan, et cetera, were very much of that mindset, and I've tried to emulate that, and I hope that I've been able to carry that on to my civilian career and the young folks I get a chance to work with and mentor. But I had great examples, just throughout, and so I was very fortunate in that respect.
Renforth is a great example. The officer he's talking about started his life as an enlisted sailor. Renforth did, and served in the Navy for several years, got accepted into the program into the Naval Academy. And for those of you who don't know, the Naval Academy produces both naval services, sailors and Marines. So Renforth went to the Naval Academy, and then was coming out of that, began serving as an officer in the Marines. Football coach, football player, also rugby coach, rugby player, and just one of the funniest people I've ever met. And he's someone I would follow anywhere as well. Chris, what about you?
So I spent from May of 2024 to this past June deployed to Iraq and Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. So if you've kind of been listening to what Frank was talking about, some of his time in Iraq and in the earlier stages of the global war on terror, it was taking ground, holding cities, building those relationships with the partner force nations in those locations. The environment we're in today, mostly through the sacrifices that Frank and his Marines and many, many others went through over the past 20 years, to include the veterans that stood up in here, is very different than what we're seeing over there right now. Our job was very, very specialized units as part of the Department of Defense, Department of War, and Department of State, doing targeted, individually based raids and strikes on individuals. We knew down to the individual person who we were going after, and that's basically all that's left over there because of the 20 years of sacrifice. But it's a very, very complex environment, because you're looking for individuals. You're not just holding an area. You're trying to find one single cell phone that's associated with one single person, and that's what you're going after. There's a portion of the Ranger Creed that mentions, under no circumstances will I ever embarrass my country. And that was something that embodied my boss and I, the general officer that I was the executive officer for while we were over there. He was in charge of the entire operation. He was the director of operations. Basically, he oversaw all of those things that I just alluded to. We were in these very complex environments of, hey, we think we found the leader of ISIS. We want to get him. Can we get him? 7-hour time change between Baghdad and Tampa, where the United States Central Command, where the 4-star commanding general was overseeing it. A lot of it was under the mindset of me being able to move out and draw fire, to understand your commander's intent, to understand the boss, and operating in that gray where you know what the goal is and you know what you're allowed to do. And as long as you're confident in that, you can do really whatever you're seeing fit. that was the first 6 months, was that focus on that de-ISIS, eliminating that leadership node. If you play that calendar of what I just told you, the second half was once the Assad regime fell and the whole Syrian dynamic was changing in real time. Every night we'd be woken up by WhatsApp phone calls from some of the leadership that you see in the news because they didn't have the structures already in place. This is a growing, brand new government showing up. They didn't have secure phones talking to us. It was them calling on WhatsApp to our interpreter's WhatsApp phone and waking us up saying, hey, they want our help with this. They want our help with this. Mind you, at that time, that new Syrian government was still classified as a terrorist organization that just overthrew the Assad regime. So it's being able to make those decisions, watching my boss make those decisions without being able to call somebody back in DC and ask for permission. He was confident in every decision he made because he understood how to move out and draw fire, understood that commander's intent. Was also phenomenal in delegating stuff to me as a then lieutenant, being able to make these decisions, which you wouldn't even imagine. Having, General Kurilla, the United States Central Command 4-star general, calling my secure phone saying a very explicit word of basically along the lines of, who the heck is Lieutenant Weaver? Because that's what the caller ID came through as. Be like, hello, sir. Yes, this is me. And then I would explain to him what my job was and he would be okay with it. But not only hearing that, but listening to what we were saying and taking it as it came, because he understood that we knew exactly what our goal was and moving out. And it made for one of the most developmental, basically year-ish of my life through that. But it was through my boss's ability to understand his role and also properly delegate back to me to help me also be able to contribute in some of those very, very unique ways.
Fantastic. He obviously didn't know about Swamp Weaver.
No.
But Waswa, any leadership stories?
Yes, sir. So I know I haven't deployed or seen combat yet, but I have learned a great deal about leadership, and something that I've learned is leadership just boils down to people. It's the armed services is a people-focused business, and it's really, really important to know your people, know what makes them tick, what motivates them to do the right stuff, to do their work. And my ship that's based out of Hawaii, I'll be a division officer, which means I'll have 10 to 15 enlisted personnel underneath me. And as a 22-year-old, having that kind of responsibility weighs upon you a lot. And what the Naval Academy has taught me, I believe, has prepared me for this role. And I do believe I'm ready. Obviously, I have a lot more to learn. And I'm just looking forward to just implementing the good leadership styles and lessons that I've seen and seen officers implement, and also staying away from the bad ones. So just looking forward to implementing my own leadership style and impacting positively the people underneath me.
Fantastic. It really is all about people. We have these big institutions that these gentlemen are part of, but it really is the people who are serving us, and leading and inspiring those people is critical and vital. Y'all, thank you. And Kathy,
Yes,
turn
so
over to you.
Mike is now going to open for anyone that, any Rotarians that want to ask a question. Please make your way to the microphone.
And I have several. Looks like some are going to come.
Okay.
First, I have to stand on my tippy toes.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your service. For those that were in active duty, the two of you, you both mentioned loss and pretty extreme circumstances. And I'm curious, if you had a magic wand, what would you do to better support our officers with their mental health needs as they come back from deployment and even while they're there?
I can start with that one. I mean, first off, it's a great question. And I will say, I was actually, just as we were riding up here, I was talking with General Whitman about just how fortunate we were come back in the War on Terror generation. I know there are horror stories of the Vietnam generation and even the greatest generation being thrust back in the workforce, not having any time. At least in the greatest generation, they were being celebrated for victory, but there was very little time to acclimate. In the Vietnam generation, there was both a kind of a national disgust towards an effort that they might not have even volunteered for, and they were being thrust back in. And I would say that while there's certainly progress that can be made, there are a great deal more resources that are available, to young enlisted and officers. I think really the most important thing they got to encourage, and this is something that really I don't know if a system can do, but this would be what was instrumental to me, is I had a foundation of family, I had friends, I had education, I had my faith. All those things were really strong foundations to fall back on as I was to move back and to try to start my new life back over again. I think the real struggle and where we need to pour resources into would be, say, young enlisted, Marines, sailors, soldiers that don't have that. Hey, I'm heading back to a small town and I may not have gainful employment. I'm not sure what to do with my GI benefits. I don't have a strong family unit. That is where the pitfalls. That is where I think veterans really fall into a great deal of issues around mental health, physical ailments, et cetera. And those are the folks I think we need to really swarm around to help support that don't have that safety net.
Yeah, I would concur on that. One of the interesting ways now that deployments to the Middle East are not necessarily drawing down, but they're a little bit few and far between, and smaller groups that are going. You come back and you're thrust into just normal life. Everybody that you're alongside, they aren't. It's not like the Greatest Generation where every single person is coming back at the exact same time, going through the exact same thing. So it's having that support system. It's knowing what's available to you, but also not only from a service standpoint, but also just that those friends that went through the same thing, those shared hardships, that it's applicable to anything, whether it's coming back from a deployment or just having that solid support network for anything you're going through. That has been, at least what I've seen from people going through similar things, just being able to talk in that open space where it's that shared understanding, shared hardship. Because yes, talking to somebody with a degree is great, but it's even better if you're with the person that went through that entire thing with you, and you're going through every single day with that person, growing, trying to come out of whatever funk you might be in, and it pays dividends down the road, just having that foundation.
Those are great comments, Stephanie. I have one other dimension of this. Families of service members, including parents, can have tremendous trauma. Children and spouses. There are lots of efforts to address that as well, but our ongoing support as citizens to help with that as well. I can tell you, young Frank, when he was in combat, he came back without any real post-traumatic stress. I'm not sure the same about his dad over here, who was up many long late nights worrying about him, and so supporting all of them, vital. There are lots of programs to do it, but we still have ways to go.
Thank you, Burke and gentlemen. Thank you so much. As an American, I'm so proud right now and grateful. And as a Lovett alum, I'm also proud to be beside you today. I did want to ask a question. My first question was around Stephanie's, but are there any organizations that truly help veterans that you can highlight? There's a lot of service days coming up this time of year. Veterans Day is tomorrow. I write letters, USO. But are there any organizations that you truly have seen help your brothers and sisters that are serving? Or the other question, since that was somewhat touched on a little bit already on the mental health area, is how has your curriculum and training maybe changed with all the geographical changes as well as the technology changes that are facing the military today? Is there anything you can talk about the changes that you see happening in the military in today's times?
I've been out a little while, so I might have to have Chris talk about the changes you've seen as far as the training environment, but I'm happy to talk to some of the other organizations.
So the training aspect, I know you hear in the news from both sides of the aisle, from every network, different narratives coming across, saying that the DOD, the DOW, whatever you want to call it, is going in one direction, is going in the other direction. But I can assure you, at least at the tip of the spear, if you will, the men and women that are doing your nation's bidding right now in corners that you don't even know exist, they're as technologically advanced, as with the best equipment, the best training, the best knowledge of what they're going through, and we're not losing. We will continue to not lose. We're in about as good of a spot as we can be in the current state that we're going to, and then actively training for that large-scale combat operation, that LISCO environment, that World War III, whatever you would like to call it. If that big one does come, not only are we prepared to do what we've been doing for the last 20 years, continue doing that, but we're also prepared to shift to where we could potentially one day go. That's going after that training that I was talking about before, that training for that unknown, and where we are as an organization, regardless of which branch of service you're alluding, or you would think, are exactly where you want you to be, and it is continuing to be the best of what this nation has to offer.
Wallace, anything on that?
I'll echo off of that. I completely agree with you, sir. I think the American public should be encouraged and have its faith and trust in our armed services. We are equipped, well trained. For me, particularly, I'm constantly just training to be my best for my people, so that when a conflict does arise, I'm ready. So I do completely agree with you, sir, that we are ready, and we stand ready to protect the American people. So.
I'll add one quick thing here. We mentioned last week, we are generally regarded, it's not just my view, but analysts in Washington around the world, we have the best fighting force in the world, the most capable. Our capacity is now less than some of our potential opponents. China is bigger, has more of everything than we do now, and that's going to continue. But we've got the best people and the best capability. We need to catch up on the quantity. 50 years ago, when the all-volunteer force started, some people thought it wouldn't work. And a lot of people said, well, who's going to volunteer for this, particularly post-Vietnam with the traumas upon returning? It's been amazing. These are amazing heroes of mine, but there are lots of them out there. They really are representative of what we have out there. And on organizations, my one comment on that would just be, do your homework. There's some great veteran organizations. I wouldn't want to endorse one or the other right now, but do a little bit of homework, because a couple of them have turned out to be not doing right financially. And one of the big prominent ones, really gotten into trouble. They've turned around. They're much better now. So do your homework. I'm happy to talk. These gentlemen will as well if you see one that you want to help out.
We're coming up on time, but I did want to make one comment briefly. I'd say less so than organizations, probably more, I would say, companies, schools, or trade schools are probably where I would lend my support to. There are a number of businesses, and I'll tell you, like Regions Bank does a great job of veteran hiring. There are a lot of universities that look at military experience and see that and have really apply that in admissions and give folks a leg up in order to get into a reach school and give them opportunities. And then also trade schools. I'd say, obviously, we know we have a trade deficit in this country. I think there's more push to be able to use GI benefits into becoming a master linesman. You can get an SBA loan and you can start your own business. You can be an entrepreneur in 3 or 4 years after getting out. There's a lot of advocacy and push towards that, and I think that those are the kind of organizations that I would leverage, knowing that it's not going to be lost in some nonprofit dollars, just personally.
So I will end with a plug. And so first of all, thank you all for your service, but I do have a plug for the JCOC, the Joint Civilian Orientation Conference. I did JCOC several years ago, and if anybody ever asks you or invites you to join and do that, it was probably the best week that I've ever spent in my entire career, because I got to go to I was part of Coast Guard, but I got to go to every part of the armed services and have experiences that I probably would have never experienced, flying on C-130s, dressing up in combat, shooting guns, doing all kind of things, crawling through mud, jumping off of walls, being in submarines. It was a bit testy. It was a lot of a test, but what I had the opportunity to do every night, we got to have dinner with the enlisted persons and spend time with them and really get to see the leadership that is developed through these young people. And so I said, thank you for your service. And that opened my eyes to how I would think about hiring people from the armed services, because they come already equipped with the leadership that many of us are trying to develop with people that we hire. So thank you for your service. JCOC, if you ever get the opportunity, please look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So thank you. Let's thank our program speakers today. And thank you all for reminding us that whether you are engaged in active conflict or whether you are just training, these jobs are dangerous. And so thank you for your service, and let's all keep them in our hearts and minds. Thank you. Future programs. Next week, we have the CEO of Rivian, R.J. Scaringe, is here with us. There is no meeting on the 24th, and then we move into December. This year is flying. On December 1st, we have a great session on adolescent mental health, which you won't want to miss. December 8th is still TBD, but Keith is actively working on that. And December 15th is Rotarian Daughters Day, and Blaine Alexander, a Dateline news anchor and wife of Rotary member Jay Bailey, will be here with our young women. So thank you. Meeting is adjourned.